I knew something was about to go sideways the second Cami told me to be useful. Her voice had that manicured smugness only a founder's daughter could perfect, like she'd practiced it between Botox appointments and bullying her Pilates instructor. We were in the break room, if you could call it that, a laminated table with crusty muffins and a half-dead Keurig. The HR lady, Jeline, who once tried to write me up for email tone, stood awkwardly near the fruit tray like it might bite her. And there was Cami, in her ethically sourced pumps and girl boss mug, smiling like a vulture who just watched the deer limp. "Be useful," she said, pointing at the tray like I was a barista with early-onset dementia. I walked up slowly, methodically, not like I was planning a scene, just like I had all the time in the world, because I did. I picked up a napkin, wiped a small smudge from the corner of a plastic plate, then set down the one thing none of them even knew they needed. A tiny black fob, matte finish, about the size of a USB key, nothing flashy. But when I dropped it onto the tray, it made a noise like a gavel hitting oak. Just a soft clink, but it echoed. Counsel, mid-sentence with the finance director, froze. His voice trailed off like a dying hard drive. His eyes locked on it, then on me. Then back to the fob. "Whose hardware signer is this?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Cami squinted at it like it was a vending machine token. "What even is that? Jennifer, seriously, is this one of your, old tech things? I told you to grab coffee, not clutter the tray." That's when I smiled, just enough to show a canine. I said, "Nobody ever asked for it back. If you're still listening, and 95% of you are without subscribing, well, you're not going to want to miss how this unfolds. So tap that subscribe button. If it like, it helps more than you know, and my team thrives off the chaos we get to share." Now, back to our regularly scheduled downfall. The room went quiet, not polite quiet, scared quiet. Counsel slowly reached for the fob like it might detonate. Then he pulled out his phone, tapped something, and froze again. His face turned the same color as the copper error screen. He didn't speak. Just handed his phone to Jeline. She read it, blinked. Read it again. Lip twitched. Is this saying? She's still the legal signer. I watched them ping through a silent panic like a busted Roomba bouncing off bad decisions. Cami laughed, actually laughed. "Oh my God, are we seriously doing this? Jennifer doesn't own anything. She left. I replaced her. Her access is revoked. HR said so." Counsel didn't laugh. "Clause 11B, he said slowly, as if dragging the words through molasses, "only transfers if there's a documented legal revocation. Chain of custody protocol. No revocation, no reassignment." Cami blinked like she was buffering. "That's okay, but someone must have signed something, right? IT, HR, legal, one of you?" No one spoke. HR sipped her lukewarm coffee like it might offer asylum. I walked to the window, watched a seagull fight a piece of foil in the parking lot, and remembered all the times I'd asked for structure, ready, for respect. 5 years I'd given them, built their license architecture, maintained every key access log, digital cert, two-factor handshake. They told me to document everything, so I did, except one thing, this. And now that little fob on a plastic tray was about to implode their entire license infrastructure. Client access, internal validation, vendor authentication. All of it ran through one thing, me. "Well," I said, turning back toward the room. "Coffee's cold. I'll be heading out." Cami opened her mouth to speak, but Counsel raised a hand. "Don't, not right now." She looked at him like he'd just canceled her trust fund. "Do you realize what this means?" Jeline whispered. "The entire system, all our license renewals, our client keys, the vault, we can't access any of it without her fob." And just like that, the pastel balloon arch behind the table, "Happy farewell, Jennifer." In Comic Sans, I'd as well have read "Welcome to Hell." No one clapped. No one said goodbye. They just stood there, surrounded by sugar-glazed pastries and corporate dread, as the only person who could save them walked out with an empty cup and not a single reason to return. 2 months before the farewell coffee, HR summoned me with that chirpy, pre-funeral tone they use before corporate executions. The invite subject line read, "Strategic restructuring alignment. Been through enough reorganizations to know alignment meant we're cutting you loose. But please bring your laptop and your dignity in a recyclable tote." The meeting room smelled like fear and dry erase markers. On one side sat Jeline from HR, clutching a pastel folder labeled transition packet. On the other, Cami, smiling like a cat that just found the canary duct-taped to a severance check. "Jennifer," she began, that fake gentle voice she uses when she's about to burn down your career. "The company's entering a new phase of innovation. Leadership believes your skill set would shine elsewhere. We're streamlining for agility. Streamlining, I repeated deadpan. Meaning, Jolene chirped, your position is being dissolved, but we're offering a very generous package. Translation, 2 weeks pay and a thank you card with a typo. I sat there, staring at the PowerPoint slide labeled Transition Vision 2.0. My entire department had been folded into Cami's Digital Future Initiative. The same Cami who once locked herself out of her own email for 2 weeks because she thought her password was case insensitive. Cami smiled wider. This isn't personal. You've been great with documentation. That's exactly what we need right now, someone who can help us capture knowledge. Gracefully. Didn't even realize what she just said. Document everything, gracefully, like I was supposed to script my own erasure with a smile. I looked down at the severance agreement in front of me. Pages of legalese, each line a quiet punch in the gut. But what I didn't see mentioned anywhere, not in the return of property checklist, not in the exit protocols, was the signer. No mention of the hardware fob. No clause about license control or keyholder reassignment. Nothing. That's when the humiliation stopped feeling like acid and started feeling like caffeine. I nodded calm, of course. I'll make sure everything's documented. Cami looked relieved, like she'd just avoided a confrontation she wasn't equipped for. Perfect. You've always been so professional, Jennifer. We'll make this transition as smooth as possible. She said it like she was doing me a favor, as if I hadn't built the very systems that made her smooth job possible. Licensing infrastructure, the client validation backbone, the hardware authenticator that every single enterprise key relied on, mine. Tied, legally and technically, to me. When the meeting ended, Jolene offered a limp handshake. We really appreciate your supportive attitude, she said. You're setting such a great example for the rest of the team. Oh, I was. Back at my desk, the walls felt smaller. My team, my former team, hovered awkwardly, waiting for a cue. One of them, and mouthed, I'm sorry. I gave him a half smile that said, don't be. I packed methodically, framed certifications, old USPs, the mug that read, I void warranties. Every movement was slow, deliberate. When I got to the locked drawer where the fob rested, I paused, opened it, looked at it for a moment. Just a plain, black piece of plastic. You'd never guess it could bring down an empire built on quarterly earnings calls and fragile egos. I picked it up, turned it over once, and slipped it into my bag. That night, in the quiet glow of my living room, I opened my private notes, a document I'd been keeping for years. My personal continuity log. I scrolled past old infrastructure changes, deployment keys, version histories, and stopped at the line that mattered. Signer, Jennifer M. Cole. Ownership, active. Chain of custody, unrevoked. I typed a small update beneath it, status confirmed. Signer control still active. Then I leaned back, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of my neighbor's TV through the wall. For the first time in weeks, I smiled, not out of happiness but recognition. They thought they'd erased me, but you can't delete what's still signed under your name. By morning, I'd decided, if they wanted me gone so badly, I'd give them exactly what they asked for: documentation, grace, and silence. The kind of silence that gets expensive later. It was a Thursday night when I cracked open the old compliance binder. Not the physical one, but the paranoid, locally saved, air-gapped copy I kept for myself. HR had always chirped about lean documentation, but I documented like I was preparing for a custody battle during a hurricane. Back when we were rolling out our enterprise license vault, legal had asked me to draft the technical language for the access protocols. I'd done more than that. I'd built the damn fortress and written the blueprints in plain English and code. And that's where I found it again. Clause 11b, buried between SLA arbitration and multi-tenant delegation like a tripwire covered in cubicle carpet. In the absence of a signed chain of custody reassignment and legal revocation, hardware signer rights default to the last verified keyholder. In other words, unless someone had officially, formally, documented that I was no longer the hardware signer and transferred it in writing to someone else, the control still belonged to me. Not just operationally. Legally, I double-checked. The clause hadn't been struck in the last compliance update. No amendment, no override. I even skimmed the minutes from the policy committee, just dusty PDF attachments on Slack. No one had touched it. No one knew. Then came the real check. Logged into the dev admin shell using my old terminal emulator. The systems were still pinging my key. Not constantly, but regularly. authentication audits, scheduled license renewals, enterprise handshakes. The system still saw me as the gatekeeper. I exhaled through my nose, slow. It wasn't satisfaction, not yet. It was the moment right before it. Like spotting dry rot under the foundation and realizing the whole house would eventually slide into the... I checked the property tracker next. IT had logged that I returned my badge, my laptop, even a dusty iPad mini from 2016. But no one had marked the fob, probably because no one even remembered it existed except me. I opened a new file, exit plan quiet. I didn't rage. I didn't slam anything or text my sister in all caps. That's not how you prepare a reckoning. You do it like surgery, calm, gloved, incision precise. Step 1, isolate the pain points. Step 2, log which systems still tied to my key would begin to expire within 90 days. Step 3, schedule those expiration flags to trigger in intervals, subtle enough to look like normal attrition. I wasn't going to sabotage anything. That would have made me like them, reactive, stupid, loud. No, I was just going to let time do its job, like gravity pulling down a Jenga tower. One quiet, forgotten block at a time. I started building a digital dead man switch. If I didn't manually delay the expiry, client license keys would quietly time out. It wouldn't be catastrophic at first, just annoying. Calls to IT, weird bug. Temporary workarounds. But the deeper the dependencies, the more brittle their fancy, restructured little tech stack would get. I paused to check the Slack archive. Cami had posted a new message in hash all hands wins. Super excited to roll out our new secure license flow. Thanks to the team for making onboarding so seamless purple hash girl power hash digital bus. That's when I knew she hadn't read a single protocol. The only thing she'd onboarded was arrogance. I sipped my tea, logged another note. Week 3, trigger license call failure for secondary verification vault. 5, revoke optional legacy bridge key for outside vendors. Week 6, flag renewal scripts for manual approval only. None of it would scream sabotage, it would whisper neglect. Just like they'd whispered me out the door. I clicked back into the compliance doc. One last reread. Clause 11b, in absence of revocation, signer retains all controlling rights. I copied it, pasted it into my exit plan file, and highlighted it. Then I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glow of the screen like it was a campfire, and felt something shift. Not vengeance, not even pride, control. I still had it. And now I was going to see exactly how expensive streamlining could become. The first domino fell 22 days after my last HR meeting. Quiet, almost tender, like a hiccup in the code that no one noticed at first, just a single client key failing to renew on schedule. One of our mid-tier accounts, kind that pays on time but doesn't throw parties. They got a licensing error, logged a support ticket. IT kicked it upstairs. Looks like a timing issue, they said, should auto-renew in the next cycle. It didn't. That key had been one of my test balloons. I'd set it to expire unless specifically reauthorized by a hardware signer me, and since no one had requested my input and no one had the fob, well, gravity works. I watched it all from the outside, no longer an employee technically, but still bound to the infrastructure like a ghost in the server logs. I didn't touch anything. I didn't need to. The system kept pinging my credentials every time a secure handshake was required, because no one had changed them. That was the beauty of it. Cami had swept in with her new energy, tossed around words like synergy and future forward, and assumed that the hard stuff was already handled. Legacy systems, outdated, redundant. Brought in a consultant from LinkedIn who wore loafers without socks and used the phrase low-code stack like it was a mating call. Meanwhile, I sat in my apartment with 3 monitors and a spreadsheet titled Passive Expiry Tracker. Every access request routed through the signer left a digital footprint. A little log line that read, request token, signer J. McColoth, right arrow, pending right arrow, no response. I didn't reject anything, didn't approve anything, just let the system wait. By week 4, IT had started to notice. First came the internal tickets. Anyone know where the override is for Vault Sequence 7? Still getting signer timeout errors, might be a caching issue. Need signer token for renewal batch. Anyone have access? Then the Slack messages. Cami posted in hash access help like she was crowdsourcing a potluck recipe. Hey team, anyone know where the vault unlock stuff lives now? I thought that was moved when we archived Jen's access. No one replied. 15 minutes later, she followed up. Lol NVM, we'll figure it out. But she didn't, because archiving my access only revoked front-end login credentials. It didn't sever signer ties. The back-end systems didn't care what HR filed or what Cami announced in an all-hands. They only knew what the compliance protocols said. And the protocol said, Jennifer M. Cole, signer. Dated my local doc. Added a new entry under observations. Day 26. Repeated signer ping from Vault Daemon right arrow unresolved. Day 27. Slack thread initiated by Cami, no resolution. Day 28. Internal chatter suggests confusion around control handoff. The silence wasn't just delicious, it was weaponized. Every unanswered ping, every failed override, every delayed key renewal amplified the tension. I wasn't breaking anything. It was just letting their laziness rot from within. On day 31, I saw a curious log entry. User Cami F attempted manual override on Vault admin. Result, permission denied. She tried to bypass the signer. Probably thought she could just click her way into authority like she did everything else, with charm and daddy's name. Didn't work. I watched the system reject her like a spleen spitting out a transplant. Another note went into my doc. System integrity confirmed. No elevation without signer consent. By now, the requests for access were pinging in steady waves. Like a heartbeat, erratic, anxious, futile in me, I was steady, patient, calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. I made tea in the mornings, watered my plants, responded to recruiter emails I used to ignore. Once a day, I'd open the logs, watch the pings come in, highlight the failures in pale red. I wasn't in the building anymore, but the building was still running on my signature. And no one, not Cami, not IT, not even legal, had asked the one question that could have diffused the time bomb. Do you still have the fob? I did, and it sat in a velvet pouch inside a cheap fireproof safe. Untouched, unneeded, unreturned. The silence was doing all the work, and I was just letting it speak. It was always going to be a junior who found it. The seniors don't delegate, but a hungry kid with a compliance checklist and too much caffeine, that's the kind of person who notices ghosts in the machine. Somewhere in a fluorescent pod labeled Risk and Governance, an overzealous 20-something named Taylor probably ran a quarterly audit report no one had reviewed since 2021. A routine scrub, verifying signer status, checking asset ownership tags, matching internal ID hashes to the license repository. Boring stuff, till it wasn't. Because buried in the output, highlighted in corporate red, was one line that didn't match the others. Signer ID, J. McColl status, active owner, non-corporate, last verified chain of custody update. Missing that one line broke the spreadsheet's conditional formatting, and with it the illusion that anyone, had officially reassigned control. It didn't scream catastrophe yet. It whispered something worse, liability. The junior did what juniors do. Flagged it, added a yellow comment bubble. Can someone confirm if this was reassigned during Q3 restructuring? Then forwarded it to the generic legal inbox and went back to alphabetizing access logs, unaware they'd just pulled the pin from a grenade with a 5-week fuse. The email hit legal's desk at 3:42 p.m. Friday. By 4:10, the first quiet inquiry had gone out. A ping to IT asking if the signer key had been replaced during the personnel transitions. IT responded with a shrug in email form. No ticket, no handoff, no physical return logged. They even helpfully attached the old property checklist. Laptop, returned. Phone, returned. Signer, line blank. By 5:12, the tone changed. Eagle sent a polite message to HR. Do you have any documentation on the revocation of Jennifer Cole's access credentials, specifically regarding hardware signers or license vault control? HR, ever useless, replied, we assumed that was handled by infrastructure. Infrastructure replied, we assumed it was covered by legal. Legal didn't reply at all, just sat quietly with a fresh kind of sweat forming at the base of the neck. The next day, first email hit my inbox. Subject, quick question vault access clarification body. Hi Jennifer, hope you're enjoying your next chapter. Smiling face with smiling eyes. Just wanted to ask, do you happen to remember where you stored the old signer materials from your time with us? No big deal, just doing a bit of cleanup on our end. Let me know when you can. I read it 3 times. Once for content, once for tone, and once just to laugh. Emoji really sold it. That little smiling face slapped at the end like duct tape over a cracked window. They didn't know how bad it was yet. They just knew something wasn't right, and that maybe, just maybe, I could patch it for them. I didn't respond. I didn't even mark it unread. I just hovered my cursor over the trash icon, let it linger there for a heartbeat, and clicked. Gone. I added a note to my tracker. Day 39, legal inquiry initiated. First contact made, ignored. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat back on the couch. Let the silence build, because now it wasn't just expired keys and unanswered pings. Now there was tension in the walls. Now the people who were supposed to be in control were starting to realize they weren't, and they had no idea just how deep the rot went. I imagined the legal team in their windowless conference room, flipping through printed access logs and highlighting entire pages in fluorescent yellow. I imagined Jeline from HR spinning in her ergonomic chair, pretending to remember some conversation about equipment returns. I imagined Cami, oblivious as ever, checking Instagram analytics, while the infrastructure she'd hijacked began to buckle underneath her. Because here's the thing about systems. They don't care about office politics. They don't care who's in charge or who got what title. They respond to keys, to protocols, to signatures. And mine was still valid. I didn't need to act, I just needed to wait. The game had finally shifted, from neglect to awareness, from apathy to inquiry, and I was already 10 steps ahead. The night of the gala, I made popcorn. The fancy kind, with rosemary oil and flaky salt, because if you're going to watch a slow-motion implosion, may as well do it with snacks. Cami was in Los Angeles, parading through some women in tech and wine circle jerk, hosted on a rooftop bar with $30 cocktails and more hashtags than handshakes. I wasn't watching the live stream, God no, but LinkedIn lit up like a Roman candle. There she was, mic in hand, laughing like she'd just discovered encryption. In one clip, she actually said the words, "We've really cleaned up the legacy mess. Vault access, totally streamlined now. New systems, modern, no more outdated dependencies, outdated." I watched that word slither out of her collagen-stretched mouth like it meant something. Meanwhile, in the real world, an hour after her champagne clink, one of our largest clients filed a priority support ticket flagged RED in the system. Failed license renewal. Authentication blocked. Vault not responding to enterprise handshake. IT scrambled, because when a client with 6 figures of contract value can't access their software, people start skipping dinner. They ran the diagnostics twice, restarted the license daemon, blamed the API, checked the certs. Finally, someone in DevOps flagged the issue for legal with a terse comment, "Signer timeout, Vault authentication failure. Ownership unverified." Legal picked up the phone. At 9:17 p.m., counsel called IT directly. I know this because a friend from the old engineering team texted me in the middle of it. "Yo, legal's panicking. Who TF is the signer?" The call, as later described to me, went something like this. "Counsel, who authorized the signer transfer post-restructuring?" IT, "What do you mean, counsel? Who has the legal signer credentials right now?" IT, "We thought she did." "Counsel, she who?" IT, "Jennifer." That's when the room went quiet. See, up until that moment, it'd all been operating on vibes and assumptions. Like if they all believed the keys had been transferred, the system would just go along with it. But systems don't respond to belief. They respond to signatures. And mine was still the one. At 9:33 p.m., Cami posted a boomerang on Instagram of her doing a little cheers dance with some VC intern in a pink blazer. Caption read, "Modern security equals modern success, Dizzy Shield #women in and for." I took a screenshot. Not for evidence, for art. By 10:02, the job listing went live. Senior licensing officer urgent hire. Must have experience with legacy access controls, signer protocols, compliance framework transition, and enterprise vault authentication. A masterpiece of panic, thinly disguised as an exciting opportunity. I clicked the link, eat through it with a glass of wine in hand. They'd even offered a signing bonus. Irony writes itself. I refreshed the support portal. 6 tickets now escalated to critical. All license-related, all timing out on handshake validation, all pinging my dormant credentials. I checked my dead man's switch scheduler. Everything was firing as planned. They still hadn't asked me directly for the fob. We're circling around the problem like it might fix itself if they just used enough buzzwords and prayer. But prayer doesn't override Clause 11b, and hashtags don't validate root-level cryptographic tokens. So I did what I'd done every night since they'd shown me the door. I closed the dashboard, logged my observation notes, added a new line, day 46, public-facing failure. Job posting confirms internal scramble. Then I muted Cami's Instagram, queued up an old jazz record, and let the icy pleasure settle into my bones. The thing about systems is, they don't forgive, they just wait. And tonight, they were waiting for me. I didn't plan the exact moment. That's not how this worked. This wasn't a script, it was a storm that had been building for months, and now it was time to let it rain. But if I had picked a time, a setting, a cast of characters for the final act, I wouldn't have changed a thing. Rooms smelled like burnt coffee and awkward endings. HR called it a farewell appreciation gathering, like slapping a ribbon on a casket, made it a celebration. A folding table had been wheeled in from God knows where, stacked with supermarket cupcakes, a cheese platter that looked like it had fought in a war, and a tray of paper cups. They'd even printed a sign in Comic Sans. "Thanks, Jennifer," with a balloon emoji that looked like it was slowly leaking its will to live. I stood there watching the people who'd ghosted me in Slack pretend they were sad to see me go. A few hollow smiles. A couple of "you'll do great things," lies from people who hadn't made eye contact with me in weeks. And then, right on cue, Cami entered. Late, of course, wearing something aggressively neutral and trying way too hard to look like leadership. "Oh good, you're still here," she said, grabbing a plate. "I thought I missed the party." I smiled. Would have been a shame. She picked up a mini cupcake, sniffed it like it might be poisoned, and turned to the group with that performative air she always used when she needed to be the loudest voice in a room that didn't ask for one. "Let's all thank Jennifer for her incredible documentation work during the transition," she said, raising her paper cup like it was a goblet of mead. "You've been useful. And hopefully, you'll keep being useful wherever you end up." Some people chuckled politely. Few eyes darted away. HR laughed a little too loudly. That was my cue. I walked over to the tray, not fast, not dramatic, just a quiet, steady stroll. Picked up a napkin, wiped a tiny smudge off the table's edge, and placed my fob, right in the center of the coffee tray. It made the softest sound. Just a click. But the room reacted like I'd set down a loaded gun. Counsel, who'd been chatting with someone from finance, turned mid-sentence. His voice faltered, face draining color like someone had pulled the plug on his circulatory system. He stepped forward slowly. "What is that?" Cami squinted. "Is that one of those dongle things? Jennifer, seriously, what is this, a souvenir?" I looked her dead in the eye, then turned to Counsel. "It's the hardware signer," I said evenly. "The one tied to the license vault, still registered to me." The silence was instant, palpable, like air had been vacuumed out of the room. Counsel reached for it, hesitated, then picked it up with 2 fingers like it might shock him. "Why do you have this?" I took a sip of the coffee they'd poured for me. It was as bitter and overbrewed as the appreciation in the room. I let the pause stretch, let the moment settle into their bones, and then said, because nobody ever asked for it back. Cami laughed. "Oh, come on, this is just dramatic. That's like a souvenir or something, right?" The IT guys reissued all the keys. Modernized. Counsel wasn't laughing. He was typing something into his phone. Then he stopped. Looked up, his face now full ghost. "You never signed the revocation paperwork." Cami blinked. "What paperwork? I asked legal about it last month," I said casually. "They emailed me, I deleted it." Cami's voice went up a half octave. "Wait, you're telling me this little plastic thing is still, what, controlling something? That's insane." Counsel turned to her slowly. "Not just controlling something. It's controlling everything. Vault authentication, key renewals, signer chain, root license access. This," he held up the fob, "is the access." HR choked on her muffin. Someone dropped a napkin. I think the guy from Ops muttered "holy shit" under his breath. Cami flailed. "Well, okay, but can't we just transfer it now, update it, whatever?" "No," Counsel said, almost whispering. "Not without her signature." Everyone stared at me, and I said nothing. I just picked up my purse, took one last sip of that awful coffee, and walked out. Let the object speak. Let the silence do its work. Let them sit there, surrounded by frosting and panic, realizing that their entire shiny, modernized operation was about to eat itself from the inside out. Because the thing they forgot to take from me wasn't a fob. It was control. And I had just set it down like a chess piece, check. Within 48 hours of the object drop, the company's spine began to snap. It started not with shouting, but with typing, legal typing, the most terrifying kind. Internal counsel called a red alert meeting, not the kind with a calendar invite, but the kind where phones buzz at 6 a.m. and no one wears jackets because they ran out of the house in a panic. Clause 11B had reared its head. They pulled up the compliance binder, my binder. The one I wrote, edited, quietly protected from all their streamlining. In its wrinkled, watermarked glory, it said this: Hardware signer rights shall remain vested in the last authenticated keyholder, unless formally reassigned through signed legal revocation and chain of custody transfer. And below that, last verified signer, Jennifer M. Cole. No revocation paperwork. No handoff chain. No override. No backup. No failsafe. Just me. By 9:00 a.m., counsel had escalated to the CEO's office. Cami was yanked out of whatever growth leadership webinar she'd booked herself into and hauled into a glass-walled conference room with 2 attorneys, an IT lead who looked like he hadn't slept since the Clinton administration, and the CFO who kept blinking like he'd swallowed a stapler. Cami, naturally, began the blame game before the door even closed. How was I supposed to know she still had access? I was told everything was reassigned. HR was supposed to, counsel interrupted, calm and cold. You led the transition. Your signature is on the release forms. You consolidated her department. You approved the checklist. And none of those documents mention the signer. Her face twisted. This is not my fault. She's doing this on purpose. Counsel didn't argue, just handed her a hard copy of the latest support stats. 11 clients with blocked license renewals, 6 security escalations, 4 early termination threats due to service breach, 1 federal vendor requesting immediate clarification, and above all, root signer unavailable. Authentication failed. I got a text that afternoon from my former team lead Alan. You broke the building. We're eating pizza and crying. Around 2:30 p.m., the formal message came. Legal, polite, but clearly desperate. Hi, Jennifer. Reaching out to respectfully inquire if you'd be open to returning the signer fob and assisting with the signer reassignment process. We understand this may come as an inconvenience, but your cooperation would be greatly appreciated. Let us know if you're available for a brief call. No threats, no legal posturing, just a tone of corporate begging dressed up in business casual. I didn't respond right away. I took my time, made a coffee, walked my dog, listened to Miles Davis, and thought about all the times they'd ignored me in meetings, steamrolled my roadmaps, or told me my concerns were too technical for C-suite visibility. Then I opened Google Docs, uploaded a PDF, labeled it Jennifer Cole Consulting Agreement 2025, PDF, and attached it to my reply. The email was short, happy to assist. My consulting rate is $1,500/hour, minimum 20 hours per paid. Payment via wire only. Scope of engagement includes key reassignment, documentation, and root signer transition. Let me know where to send the invoice. Then I hit send. Less than 5 minutes later, the scene indicator lit up. 10 minutes after that, the CFO replied. No argument, no pushback, just understood. Please provide wiring instructions. Just like that, I went from being disposable to indispensable, a line item in HR's offboarding sheet, to the only person who could stabilize their crumbling infrastructure. I didn't gloat. I didn't post cryptic quotes on LinkedIn. I didn't call anyone to brag. I just opened a fresh document and labeled it Transition Plan Paid Version, because I wasn't their employee anymore. I was the solution, the product, the queen on the board. And every hour they hesitated was another hour they bled credibility. Funny how things change. A month ago, I was quietly boxed out of my own systems. Now, they couldn't reboot without my signature, and it cost them $1,500 just to hear me say hello. 3 days. That's how long it took them to stop posturing and start wiring. 3 days of clients escalating to the C-suite, of legal pacing like caged dogs, of Cami issuing Slack commands like a panicked toddler trying to steer a cruise ship with a juice box straw. The wire hit my account at 9:01 a.m. on a Thursday. Full retainer, no negotiation, no delay. The subject line on the confirmation email read, Consulting Services Vault Reinstatement. That afternoon, they reactivated my badge. Temporarily, controlled access, escorted by security. A formality, they said. But I didn't need freedom. I needed 20 feet of hallway and a working smart card. I wore black, not out of drama, but efficiency. Blazer, flats, no jewelry, like an undertaker on a tight schedule. The security guard waiting for me in the lobby tried to make small talk. I ignored him. The office had changed. The walls were quieter, conversations hushed. People glanced up from their desks like wildlife, sensing a pressure drop before a storm. One woman whispered, "Is that her?" I was a fabled creature, dragged back for one last sighting. I walked past the innovation wall, now featuring a framed quote from Cami that read, "Disruption starts with a clean slate." The irony was so dense you could have sliced it, and served it with crackers. At the end of the corridor, two members of legal waited. One held the revocation paperwork. The other held a printed list of all active license keys pending reauthentication. No one spoke. I sat, handed me a laptop, the fob port already primed. I inserted it, ran the sequence. Each key lit green on the internal dashboard as it reauthorized, one by one. The silence was louder than any applause. Then came the final step. A digital signature pane opened on the secure document viewer. Title: Signer Revocation and Transfer of Custody Agreement. I read every line, not because I didn't trust it, because they needed to watch me do it. Watch the woman they discarded inspect their legal lifeline like she was deciding whether it deserved rescue. At the end, I clicked sign. The system pinged, confirmation received. I handed back the laptop, reached into my purse, removed the fob, still warm from the port, and placed it gently on the table. No words, no thank you, no final zinger. Just the clink of power being relinquished on my terms. I stood, straightened my jacket, walked out. Security guard tried to catch my eye again. This time, I looked at him, said nothing. But something in my silence made him step back without knowing why. At home, I poured a drink, closed every open doc, archived the consulting contract, labeled the transaction complete, cleaned the slate. The next week, an anonymous update hit the company's org chart. Cami's name vanished from the executive roster. No announcement, no memo, just removed. Internally, they called it a realignment. Externally, they said nothing at all. But I knew, no headline, no revenge post. Just a system that finally balanced its own books. And me? I never raised my voice, never filed a complaint, never sent a single nastogram. I just signed once. And the signature ended them. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.